Okay, thank you for joining us this afternoon. We have a workshop on utility adjustment petitions for property owners. It is February 6th of 2025, and my name is Patricia. I help run the rent stabilization division over here for the city of Mountain View, and I am glad you're here to ask questions and learn about this process. I'm going to do a quick hand raise poll. If you can raise your hand to answer this question, that would be great. How many people are here for the first time today to learn about utility adjustment petitions? Go ahead and use the raise hand feature. This will help me tailor the workshop a little bit. If you can respond, that would be great. Okay, thank you. I've got one person responding. If you can raise your hand if you're new here. I see some names that I haven't seen before, so I want to make sure I can tailor this presentation a little bit for everyone. Anyone else who's new, if you could raise your hand, that would be great. Okay, I'm going to assume that there's at least two other people that are new here today. You can go ahead and lower your hand if you raised it. All righty, so I think we'll get going at the beginning here and at the very beginning, and I'll talk you through what the petition process looks like, why it exists, and then we'll look at some of the basic information. I am going to be starting to record an walkthrough of the workbooks, and that should be available next week. So for today, we're going to go with a high-level overview of why we're here, how we got here, and then jump into what those petition forms and workbooks look like a little bit. You can ask questions. You can ask questions by raising your hand or by utilizing the Q&A feature through Zoom, and I will do my best to answer your questions as I can. All righty, let's get going. So today, we're going to go over introduction to changes in utility billing. That's our basics there. We're going to go over key points of the regulations. What are things that you as the landlord should absolutely know? And then we'll dive into the petition process a little bit. Now, number 4 on here says that questions will be at the end, but you can ask questions anytime. And if I happen to be covering the topic a little bit later in the workshop, I will review it then. All right, so let's get going. So what's the major change or update? Not a change to the regulations, but a clarification to the regulations. We always have in the CSFRA has always stated that rent includes utilities. So since 2016, when the law went into effect, rent was supposed to include utilities. And in that, thus they are subject to rent increase limitations, as all rent is. And there can only be one increase every 12 months. That increase is subject to a yearly increase limit called the annual general adjustment. And there can be no fluctuating rental costs within a 12-month period. And that is, those two there are really where we start to get into trouble with RUBS. So if you have rent that does not include utilities, and you're charging through a system like RUBS, where it's not sub-metered utilities like PG&E, where the usage is directly linked and tied to, and the bills are directly linked and tied to what the actual tenant is actually doing, then you have an issue. So what we see with RUBS is that the charges go up and down throughout the year. That is not allowed under the CSFRA. So on December 18th of 2023, a little over a year ago, the Rental Housing Committee that oversees the Rent Stabilization Division and implements the CSFRA adopted regulations to clarify that utilities are part of rent for fully covered units. What does that mean? Well, that means that a whole lot of properties are not in compliance with the law. And so to address this, the division is implementing a one-time utility adjustment petition to incorporate utilities that are currently charged separately through RUBS into a fixed total rent amount. So you're going to have your physical space rent or the current rent, you can think of it like that, plus the separate utilities billed through RUBS. And through this petition process, those two things are going to now create a new total rent. And the RUBS bills will go away. So every single property owner who is a property owner of a fully covered unit needs to complete and submit a petition to qualify for and apply the adjustment. Even if you think that you do not charge your utilities through RUBS, you need to still let my office know by emailing us at mvrent@mountainview.gov. And you need to fill out a petition form, a shortened petition form, and a shortened workbook so that we can contact your tenants to verify that you do indeed include your utilities in your rent. So every single fully covered CSFRA unit needs to complete and submit a one-time utility petition. And the process does not apply to partially covered CSFRA units or mobile homes. And before I keep going into what the regulations really deep dive into, are there any questions that I can answer that have to do with what I just covered? You can raise your hand or use the Q&A function. Okay, I don't see any, so I'm going to keep moving on because we cover a lot in this workshop and I want to make sure we get through as much as possible. So what type of utilities are or should be included in rent? Any utility charges that are paid by the tenant directly to the landlord or through a third-party billing service like Conservice or otherwise known as RUBS, ratio utility billing systems. These could include water, sewer, and garbage. Sometimes we see gas and sometimes we see electric through RUBS. You might have a situation where you have boilers that heat the hot water for your tenants by building instead of by unit. In that case, you likely also charge gas heating for the hot water heating through RUBS. So just keep that in mind. There are different workbooks. There's one workbook that does not include gas and electric and one workbook that does. If you have hot water heating through RUBS, you need to use workbook B because that has a section for you to input gas expenses. All right, so if a landlord is already including utilities in the fixed amount of rent, that is exactly what should have been happening since the start of the CSFRA. No changes can occur. You can't now start charging for RUBS or add on additional utilities related costs. You can't go for one of these petitions to incorporate utilities into rent because you already include utilities in your rent. You'll still need to file that shortened petition that I was mentioning. It's workbook C, so that your tenants can indeed respond to the petition. All righty, so key points of the regulations. For new tenancies, which started March 1st or after, RUBS is not allowed. So if you have tenancies that started after March 1st, just know that you need to make sure that they don't have RUBS included in them, that the rent includes utilities. The total rent must include those utilities that were previously charged through RUBS. The rental agreement must state the total rent and specify the types of utilities and housing services that are included in rent, like water, garbage, sewer, parking, and pet fees. And then utility charges, just as a reminder, that are paid directly by the tenant to the service provider or are submetered are exempt from this process. So what's the biggest takeaway here for new tenants as of March 1st, 2024? The total rent must include utilities. And for existing tenancies, RUBS can continue until a utility adjustment petition is filed and approved by the city, and the rent adjustment notice is given to the tenant and the adjustment goes into effect. So all the way up until that effective date of that notice, you can charge through RUBS. Once that effective date is has arrived, once it is the date on the notice, RUBS has to go away and the rent now includes utilities. And what's the biggest takeaway here? For a limited time, utilities can continue to be charged separately from rent for existing tenancies that started before March 1st of 2024. And then for tenant petitions, I'm not going to go a whole lot into this. If a tenant files a petition related to RUBS charges only, it's on hold temporarily. Now, if you have been doing something that is perhaps unlawful, like for instance, your tenant had utilities included in their rent, and then you as the property owner removed those utilities from rent and started charging separately for those utilities that had previously been part of rent, your tenant can still file an unlawful rent petition with the city. And it is important to note that if you have a unique situation like that, You're also not eligible to apply for the RUBS petition, and you would want to contact our office and have us help you get into compliance with the law, because technically you're charging unlawful rent, and you're not allowed to give rent increases. So if you have a scenario like that, be sure to get in contact with me so I can help you get back into compliance with the law. Before I move on to going over what the actual petition process for the utility adjustments look like, I want to check in and make sure that there are no questions out there. Are there any questions? You can use the raise hand feature. All right, I've got one question. Tim, I'm going to go ahead and allow you to talk. You can unmute yourself, Tim. Or Ted, excuse me.
Hello? Hello?
Hi, Ted.
Hello?
Hello, can you
Can you
hear
hear me?
us? Yep, we can hear you.
Yes. Okay, great. So I have a question. We put in sub-meter per unit during the past year. And then we will be starting to basically bill the individual units instead of using RUBS. So in that case, do we still need to file a petition, or do we just file that each unit is paying according to their own sub-meters?
So you would want to reach out to us and let us know that each unit is paying by their own sub-meters, and then we can send out a notice to the tenants, like I was saying, for those condensed petitions. Now, I do want to note, Ted, that in this instance, you have to give a rent decrease for the average amount of these utilities over the past year. So you need to figure out what the average amount of utilities charged to your tenants was, and then give a commensurate rent decrease. Otherwise, it's an unlawful rent increase. So I
Yeah, I
can walk
understand
you.
that part.
I can walk
Yeah,
you
I
through
understand
that
that
if
part. So right. So
I.
what we're doing is we're not really increasing rent. So previously the tenant has been paying the utilities according to RUBS. Now they're not paying the RUBS portion of the utilities. Instead, they're paying their individual portions.
Got it. So just go ahead and reach out to me at patricia.black@mountainview.gov so I can make sure that you're doing everything 100% according to the CSFRA, and you're in a good place so that you don't get hit with an unlawful rent petition.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure. All righty, we're going to go ahead and move on. Thank you, Ted. So how does this one-time utility adjustment petition process work? This is our implementation plan. So you can see here we are through the first 3 phases. The first one was performing research and receiving input on the from a variety of stakeholders, including property owners and tenants. The second one phase was adopting regulations, and we finished that up in December of 2023. And then we started on the implementation of this process. And so now we are in phases 4, 5, and 6, performing outreach and education, which you're part of right now. Phase 5, which is where landlords are submitting petitions to our division. Again, we're in the middle of this one. And then phase 6 is us processing these petitions. And we are, as staff, doing that. So as you can see, we are underway for these last 3 phases, and they will all continue until we're done. So what are your submittal deadlines? If you have a property with more than 20 units, your submission is due by February 28th of 2025. So it's coming up. If you are a property with 6 to 20 units, your submission is due May 31st. And if you have 1 to 5 units, it's due on August 31st. If you miss your submission deadline, there are serious repercussions. So which petition is required for your property? This is based on how tenancies using RUBS that were in existence before March 1st are being billed for utilities. The first one is the standard workbook, workbook A. And here at least one utility is paid by the tenant directly to the landlord or through RUBS, water, sewer, and trash, and all PG&E related expenses are paid to either the service provider or through submetering. So that would be your gas and electric. Workbook B is that one that I mentioned that combines all of the utilities. So if you have a situation where you're charging through RUBS for gas and electricity, or gas and electricity. And water, sewer, and trash are billed through RUBS, you would use workbook B. And then finally, workbook C is that everything is either included in rent or submetered water, sewer, trash, gas, and electric. And you would use that condensed version of the workbook and contact me. So what does this process look like? This is a step-by-step overview of what the actual process as we go through the petitions looks like. So the first step is you as the property owner completing and submitting a petition packet to my office. That packet will include a petition form, a workbook, and documentation. The petition form has a lot of instructions in it to help you do this on your own or through guidance with me. It has a workbook that also has instructions in it. And both of those things tell you exactly what documentation you need to be gathering for us. You're going to submit that entire packet to me. If it's missing any of those big pieces, I will not count it as a submission. So just keep that in mind. I'll email you back and let you know, like, hey, I didn't get your petition form. You need to send that back to me before I count this as a submission. But just as a flag, our office won't accept it as a submission, a formal submission, until it has all of those major components. Step number 2, we will then review the petition packet for completeness, and we'll notify you. We'll say this looks good. You can serve it on the tenants. And if not, we'll say you need to fix these things. And then you're going to go ahead, once we give you the all clear that it looks complete. Now, we haven't checked your calculations, although we do a little bit of that. We haven't looked to make sure everything is there, to the T, like we will be doing when we do our final review. But we are doing a general holistic overview of whether or not your petition looks like it's ready to give to your tenants. And there are a couple of steps in there. If it's incomplete, you'll receive a notice from me that says your submission reviews determined that your petition is incomplete and you need to provide this, this, and this. I will spell it out for you exactly what you need to do to finalize your petition. If it's complete, you'll receive a first email from me requesting when you're planning to serve the petition on your tenants and what type of service you're going to do. So email or delivering it by hand or putting it in the mail. And then we'll go ahead and we will provide you with additional documents based on what you tell us, including a proof of service form that is mostly filled out for you. So all you have to do is sign it. Once you serve the petition on your tenants and you file it with the city, you are going to send me a notice. You are going to send me a notice and say, hey, I filed this. And I'll say, great. And then we will send out a notice of formal filing to you and to your tenants. Your tenants then have a 30-day response period to let us know if there's something in the petition that is completely wrong. For instance, we had one where the property owner accidentally put the total number of rooms where the number of bedrooms were. There's not a way for us as staff to really know that information without the tenant's input. So that tenant helped this landlord, and we were able to send out a notice of updated petition to the tenants so that they could review the petition in its more accurate form. So once the tenant response period is up, if we receive responses, we take that into account and we have a whole separate process for that. If it doesn't have responses, then we go through our actual review of the petition. We review selected calculations as determined by the regulations. And if needed, we reach out to the property owner with questions and request additional documentation. If we determine that the calculations are correctly calculated, we will send out a notice to the landlords and to the tenants of the final determination. And that'll tell the tenant what the rent adjustment amount is going to be. And then once that happens, the landlord needs to provide an upward or downward adjustment of rent notice to the tenant. We will actually help you populate that. In this process, you're going to provide us with the averages of your tenant's utility expenses over the course of a year. And then we're going to help you with this form that we are just about done working on so that you can actually get this information out to your tenants. You have to use the form that we provide. That is part of the regulations, and we will definitely have that for you. So no need to worry there. Once that's done, once you've given them the notice, there are 2 more things that need to happen. One is You need, if it's a downward adjustment of rent from the utility petition process, you need to provide a notice to your tenants in pretty much immediately, a 30-day notice of when their downward adjustment will go into effect. So you are giving, it's a little confusing, and it's going to be a little confusing for your tenants. You are giving a rent adjustment notice that no matter what will look like an increase in rent, because we're taking the tenant's total rent and we're adding the utility adjustment to it. However, for some tenants, it's actually going to be a downward adjustment of rent, because keep in mind that rent includes utilities. If the adjustment in the petition is lower than their average utility costs over the course of a year, then that is a downward adjustment in rent. And that needs to be notified within 30 days. So you get this notice of final determination from us. It's comes up to be, March 1st, then you need to give a 30-day notice to your tenant that the downward adjustment will be applied April 1st. So that's the way it works for downward adjustments. Now, if it's an upward adjustment of rent, so if the utility adjustment from the petition process is more than what the tenant was paying as an average for their utilities, then that's considered an upward adjustment. To give the upward adjustment, you need to do that at the next time they're eligible to receive their rent increase. So RUBS will continue until 12 months has passed from their most recent rent increase, because that's the CSFRA law. And then you would apply, if you're going to give the next year's allowed rent increase, you would apply that allowed rent increase to the total rent. So like, let's say in this case, our tenant had a rent of $1,000 plus our 2.4% increase, that's $24. So 1,000 plus 24 would be $1,024. And then the proposed rent adjustment would be added to that. So let's say we have a tenant whose rent adjustment was $200. Their rent would be 1,000 plus the 24 for the AGA of 2.4%. plus the one-time utility adjustment of $200. So their new total rent moving forward will be $1,224. Okay, so we can think of it like that. I'm going to go ahead and put this example into the slides for the next round of slides that we're doing so that we can actually look at it. But that is generally how these rent increases can be applied. Okay, so we just got through the process there. This is all of the things that I just said, but much more wordy. And these slides will be available so you can go back and take a look at them. I want to go over this one. If you do not submit a petition and you are charging through RUBS within these deadlines, or you don't comply with the applicable requirements of the process, you as the property owner forego the one-time ability to add the utility adjustment amount to the rent, and you can no longer charge separately for RUBS. So what does that mean? That means that if the rent is $1,000 right now, and you don't do this process, you don't get to add in the utility adjustment. In our hypothetical situation, we had utilities of $200 a month. So that $200 a month that goes away, you can no longer charge your tenant through RUBS separately for utilities. Their rent at $1,000 now includes utilities. So keep that in mind. You really want to make sure you hit those submission deadlines, and you really want to submit a petition if you charge through RUBS. Also, tenants can file an unlawful rent petition with the city to recover any overpayment due to RUBS charges. So that means however long ago they've been paying through RUBS for their rent, which is technically not allowed under the law, they can then petition the city to recover those overpayments in rent, and you could owe quite a lot of money back to your tenants. So I want to really impress that this is an important process, and you do not want to skip it if you bill through RUBS. Okay, calculating the utility adjustment. Before I go on, does anyone have any questions? All right, we're going to hop into the next section then. Oh, Ted, do you have a question? All righty, Ted, I'm going to allow you to talk. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, so the question is, there's a deadline for us to send in the applications or the petitions. And then, so how is that calculated? For instance, my deadline would be May 31st. And then, is that the deadline that I just need to send in the filled out form to the city?
Mhm.
Or is that,
Yep.
or is that everything is completed from the city side, completing that
No,
7-step
that's
process?
your deadline to submit your petition packet.
Got it. Thank you.
Not a problem. Thank you, Ted. Okay, so we're going to talk now about how you calculate that utility adjustment. So all of these calculations, everything is done through the workbooks that we've created, and they run through Excel. Okay, so you can't fill these out by hand. If you don't have Excel, you're going to want to contact our office so that we can send you a special link to access Excel and these workbooks through an online provider. Okay, these cannot be filled out by hand. There's no way, but we can help you if you don't have Excel. Okay, so I'm going to stop my share, and I'm actually going to share a petition form with you so that you can see what you need to be filling out. I'm going to share, I mentioned that there are 3 different types of workbooks, and I'm going to focus on the one that applies to most people, which is workbook A. And then the petition form is the same form for everyone. You just mark different boxes. Okay, these are all available online at mountainview.gov/rubs, by the way. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And here is what the petition form looks like. So you have an overview, why we're doing this, how does the process work? This gives you a step-by-step overview of what this process looks like. Please review it. A bunch of your questions will be answered here. And then it goes into how to prepare to file a petition. So what do you need to do? We have relevant terms that are down here further in the packet. You're going to want to take a look at the regulations. And then the next step is going to be to figure out which workbook is applicable to you. So if you click one of these options, it's going to let you know which workbook you need to use. Like I said, we're going to assume that we are a standard property and we're going to pick workbook A. It then goes over all of the things that you need to gather, okay? Everything that you need to know to be able to update these petition forms. And then you're going to figure out if you need a representative. Is someone going to file this petition on your behalf? If so, you're going to gather this information, and there's a specific form available on the website for that. You're then going to go ahead and complete the petition, okay? So you're going to complete the petition form, which is what we're looking at now, and the workbook. And then you're going to submit it to my office for a review. Finally, you'll serve the petition, and then you'll wait to hear from us. Okay. So what does, this is what our petition terms look like. These are important definitions. You're going to want to take a look at this so you can know what you're looking at here. And then finally, we have our petition form. The form itself is pretty basic. You're going to put in the landlord's information, what type of ownership there is. If it's something other than an individual owner, the information for the trustee, the CEO, or the managing member or partner. If you need translation and interpretation support, you can indicate that here. And then if you are having this completed, or if you are the completing representative, you're going to fill that information out. The second page requests information on the property, including the number of units that are fully covered on the property, and also goes over those submission due dates again. Finally, we're looking at the common area amenities. Do you have these things on your property? Where we will then select the relevant workbook, and then you'll provide documentation. So again, if you're doing workbook A and B, you have certain documentation requirements. And if you're doing that condensed workbook option C, you'll have other requirements. If you're missing any documentation, you're going to want to let us know what you're missing and why. And then finally, if there's anything really important, for instance, Ted, if you're filling out the petition form for your condensed petition process, you're going to just let us know here, in additions and explanations, that you used to bill through RUBS and now you are charging separately for utilities through submetering. Finally, you'll sign the back of the petition form. So the petition form itself is pretty simple and easy to do, and it gives you a lot of really good information. And then to support that, after you also gather your documentation, you're going to fill out this workbook. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here. Like I said, I'm making a step-by-step video of kind of how to go through this workbook, but we will take a quick look at it. I just want you to get slightly familiarized with it. Like I mentioned, the first worksheet is instructions, and it gives you what kind of documentation you need to attach for that worksheet. And then we have contact information for your tenants, unit information. This is worksheet 2. This is probably our most important one. I'm going to show you really quickly. If you put in a number here, it's going to put in that unit number over here. If you have more than one primary tenant for your units, please only input one. If you put in more than one, it's going to count that unit number twice, and we don't want that. So I'm going to show you really quickly how it works. You will pick the number of bedrooms, not total rooms, but bedrooms that you have. And it's going to make then a calculation of the total number of rooms. So here you see we have a 1-bedroom plus that kitchen and that living room for that 1-bedroom apartment makes a calculation of 3 rooms. The next piece of this is for our Santa Clara County calculation. There are 2 calculations that are being looked at here. And between those 2, a calculation will happen to determine which one of them is the lesser of, and whichever one is the lesser of, that's the one that determines the calculations for the petition process. So for this Santa Clara County calculation, it looks at the size of the building. So we're going to put in that this is a building with 5 or more units, and it is occupied. We're going to tell the workbook our move-in date, which I'm going to make up a dummy number. And I'm going to tell the current rent, the date of last rent increase. In this case, the unit received a rent increase in 2023, and how water is charged. So if this was a new tenancy starting after March 1st, on or after March 1st of 2024, I would need to put, because it is included in rent, that water is included in rent. So I'm going to tell the workbook that we have water included in rent here, that we have trash included in rent, and that we have the sewer included in rent. And then the water is charged for this unit paid by tenant to the landlord. And I'm going to put in one more unit so that you can see kind of how this is working. Okay, so we put in this unit information. I'm going to say that this is a studio. You'll see it's saying, yes, there's a kitchen. Yes, there's a living room, but there's no bedroom. So it's only a 2-unit. It's in a building with 5 or more units, and it is occupied. Okay, so we have all of that information in here. And their rent is $1,200, and they haven't received a rent increase. So we are going to put in the move-in date, like it says in the directions there. Okay. So this is worksheet 2.1 is a reference chart for how these calculations work. Basically, what this is saying is for the Santa Clara County utility allowance calculation, it's looking at the number of bedrooms in a unit by size of the So how many units are in the building? And then it looks at the type of utility provided, and that gets added to the equations that we'll see a little later. Next up is worksheet 3, which is our common area. We're going to say that every single thing here, pool, landscaping, and common laundry facilities apply. So our common area deduction is 20%. And then we're going to go ahead and fill out our water, sewer, and trash. And I'm just going to do this really quickly. I'm not going to put in our service dates. I'm just going to put in really basic numbers so you can see that everything is adding up based on what type of utility it is. So I put in $500 for water, and you can see it populated right up here. I put in 200 for sewer and 600 for trash, and it all populated up at the top for you. You really don't have to do much to get this workbook working. Then we have our utility totals here, and this is telling us what our water charges are, what our sewer charges are, and what our trash charges are, and then showing us the common area deductions for the number of rooms on the property. We then go through a whole calculation of utility charges per room, and you're seeing all of that calculation happening here. So basically what this is saying is that at this property, for a whole year, there was $500 of water. We subtract the common area deduction, we divide that amount by 12, and then that gets divided by the number of rooms on the property, which gives us a monthly water charge per room of $6.67. And you'll see that for each of these utilities, it's broken down that way. Then that gets us over to our per unit calculation. So for our unit where they moved in after March 1st, it tells us what happened here. So this unit is not subject to this process. And then for here, it tells you what the water charge per room from worksheet 5 is multiplied by the number of rooms in the unit. So all of this is now being looked at and compared, and we get our totals here. So in this case, the per unit calculation is going to determine that the lesser of the two calculations is the City of Mountain View adjustment. It'll be $52 plus the consumer price index increase. And then finally, at this last page, you will give the proposed utility adjustment amount. So it's important to remember that you can go up to the ceiling limit of the maximum monthly utility adjustment, or you can go below. And there are some property owners who are choosing to charge a little less than what this maximum is. So you're going to want to make sure that that's filled out. For units where it's not applicable, you'll just put 0, or you can leave it blank, either way. And that's the basics of how the workbook looks. And I am going to go ahead and continue on with the presentation. Are there any questions about the workbook and the petition form? This is a really fast overview. If you have a question, you can use the raise hand feature and I can allow you to talk, or you can enter your question in the Q&A feature. This is your time to ask questions. There's not a lot of people here right now. So if you have questions, it's a great opportunity to ask me directly. Okay, I'll keep going with our quiet bunch this afternoon. Let's see. Okay. So I'm going to skip over this. This is just how the calculations work. And then I'm going to jump into what you should do to prepare for the petition. So you're going to want to start gathering your property-wide utility bills from July 1st of 2023 through June 30th of 2024. You're going to gather documentation of the pool, landscaping, and laundry facilities on the property, including pictures and floor plans. You're going to go over the unit information and individual unit documentation, such as your tenants' names, contact information, date of tenant move-in, rent increase information, and floor plans. And then a proof of utilities including that are a proof of utilities that are included in rent or submetered. So we're going to need a copy of a rental agreement showing that utilities are part of rent for all units that have utilities included as part of rent. And we're going to need a picture and proof of submeters and individual utility bills. This is what we need for the condensed process. So tenant information and then proof of that utilities are included in rent or are submetered. And then you're going to want to start just filling out those forms and reaching out to staff. This process can take a while. So if you think that you're going to just get it all through immediately and you have a big property, you are probably going to need to contact us and get working with my team to get this processed before the deadlines happen. Remember, those deadlines are coming up and our office is here to help. We're here to support you. So please, please, please reach out to us. And so how do you reach out to us? You can contact us by coming to the Housing Help Center for landlords. These are happening every single Thursday from 1 to 3 p.m. You can walk into our office at 298 Escuela, or you can join virtually by going to mountainview.gov/housinghelpclinics. You can also come to our virtual office hours, which happen every Tuesday from 10 to noon. And you can join those by going to mountainview.gov/RSP office hours. And then finally, you can always email us at mvren@mountainview.gov or give us a call at 650-903-6136. And that is, if there's no other questions, that is our workshop for today. If there are questions, you can go ahead and raise your hand right now, and I'd be happy to answer them. If not, we're going to get going. Alrighty, thank you everyone for joining us today. Again, it is February 6th, and you just received a presentation on utility adjustment petitions. Go ahead and reach out to my office if you need anything, and we'll talk with you soon. Thank you so much.